Hi guys, William Morris here, and today I'm going to be taking a look at a library called Stone, which is the first release from developer Murst Instruments, who are based here in the UK. So Stone is made for the full version of Kontakt 6 and above, and it's described as a collection of 16 instruments grouped together by texture and timbre. It has a launch price of £39, so around $50 US. I believe the launch price is valid until the 26th of June, so you've got a couple of weeks to take advantage of the offer. So Stone uses a layered approach and encourages you to sculpt each instrument within the central UI. So your starting point is going to be here on this 4x4 grid, and this is where you can select all your layers. The top layer is 4 different bass sounds. The next layer down is 4 different cello sounds. So we have a legato layer. We have unstructured cello phrases. It's also granular cello. And an organ fuzz layer. So this cello layer actually plays in conjunction with this 4th layer here, which is the sort of granular and noise layer, and they are both triggered in the central blue section of the keyboard here. The basses are all triggered in the bottom red section, and the 3rd layer, which I'll get onto a second, is this orange zone. So I'll just play the granular noise layer, and for that we just need to turn the volume on the cello layer down so we can hear just the noise one, and then I'll put the volume up on the noise layer here. So these 2 layers are obviously tied together. Number 4, the noise layer, and number 2, the cello layers. So they will always play at the same time, and you can set the volumes independently and all the panning and everything else as well. One thing that might be nice is to be able to change which layer triggers the noise layer as well. So you could maybe have the bass layer triggering the noise layer, so it's kind of a held note underneath. So there's one last layer to take a look at, which is the 3rd layer here, and this is the struck layer. So it's 4 different plucked or struck sounds to kind of make maybe an arpeggio over the top, or your kind of accented notes for your pattern. So that covers all the basic layers. Everything at the minute is kind of in its raw and natural state, I guess, because there's a lot we can do in the UI to shape the sounds, and we've not added any of our effects here at the bottom yet. So what you're getting is kind of the dry sort of raw tones from each layer at the moment. So with the grid approach, we can now combine all these layers into a multi-zoned instrument, or of course you can just use one layer at a time. And there are individual volume, panning, attack, and release controls for each layer individually. So you can really mix and sculpt each layer within the UI. So this probably brings me on to the overall design of the UI, which I think gets 4 marks for aesthetics. It's really clean, minimal, very modern looking. However, I have found the sort of pictorial style with using kind of, pictures, I guess, as opposed to full words for the labeling system does make a new user such as myself having to refer to the manual a little bit just to learn what some of the controls do, especially the effects section here. So it might have been nice to have maybe some more labeling or just something to kind of better understand what everything is for a new user. And maybe there could be even an ability to hide that information later on if you wanted to go back to a cleaner kind of aesthetic like it is at the default. So you'll notice there are no presets, which in a library of this size I actually quite like. It encourages you to play with the controls and develop your own combinations of layers and effects. And you can, of course, save snapshots within Kontakt if you find something that you'd like to return to. Something I wouldn't have minded, however, is maybe just a little button to return all the controls back to 0 or normal. But it's pretty easy just to reload the one patch as well, so not a big problem at all. So let's move on to the effects section, and then I'll play a little more with the sounds. So first we have a low pass and high pass cutoff. So these have LFO controls built in as well. Next we have saturation control, phase, stereo width, so you can obviously go wide or narrow with the stereo image, built-in room reverb, and blur on the end here. So pretty self-explanatory for the effects, maybe except for blur. I'm not entirely sure what it does, but I really like the sound of it, so I'm going to have it probably turned up a fair bit for the stuff I'm doing. So I'll have a little play now and just let you hear more of the library and how the controls work together as well. Please forgive my playing. I'm not a keyboard player by any means, and it is a little tricky on a multi-zoned instrument like this spread across several octaves of keyboard to kind of, play with anything, but obviously this could be programmed or altered later on as well. So I think I'm going to start off just with the basic layer of the bass, which is the kind of most natural analog synthy kind of sounding thing. Let's choose layer 1 on the cello as well. And I really like this layer on the struck sounds. Kind of a nice soft key sort of sound there. For the noise, let's just go with the second one there for now. Just going to put the volume down a little bit on that one. And let's turn the volume back up on our cello samples as well. Just going to turn the noise up a touch. Let's go for a slower attack on the cello sounds and give it a lot more release as well. Let's also give some slow attack on the bass and the release as well. I'm going for a kind of slower, paddier sort of sound here. I think I'm going to choose that noise layer maybe instead. Sound on this. And this would be a good opportunity to show you the blur control, which I really like. So it's probably best on the struck sound that I demonstrate this. So you can hear it there, and this is cranked up. So you get these really kind of nice, almost like granular tail kind of things on the end. Really atmospheric, I kind of like that control. digging that. I think that's kind of a cool sound, and it's really nice to play in this UI actually. I mean, it's simple, but it's got enough control just to you know, get you going. It's got the basics that you'd need, I guess, just attack release, which you can do so much with even on their own, and then your little mix section. And the effects, you know, there's not a ton of them, but I mean, it really kind of works. I do really like this blur control. For some reason, the library just makes me want to play these particular sorts of sounds, but there's definitely more kind of range in it as well. So let's kind of skip through some of the rest as well. Let's change the bass sound up and the cello one as well. I'm going to turn the blur down a little bit and the room sound as well, go a bit drier. So one thing that's kind of jumping out a little bit to me is that it might be nice some point down the road to have separate controls for your reverb and blur and stuff like that, because there's a lot of times where I kind of want to have, I guess, maybe a lot more verb on some sounds than others. So let's change the cello sound up again. And this one's a kind of pulsy, rhythmic kind of thing, which is cool. As I say, it's quite hard to play, well, for me anyway, across the octaves, play anything meaningful, but hopefully that gives you a little bit of an idea. Switch up to the final cello sound. Probably one of my favorites, that one. It's great for scoring because you can kind of do quite minimal moves, but it's still got that interest there. Let's switch up the struck sounds here and have a little listen to these as well. And I've just changed the noise layer at the bottom. And while we're at it, let's change the bass as well. I think this third layer is kind of the more aggressive of the four. On that struck one, and maybe pop the blur back up a little bit in the room. I think for the style thing I'm playing there, the struck one would have to be like a cool little arpeggiated pattern or something like that. So I hope that gives you an idea of at least a few of the sounds that you might be able to get from this library. I'm only really scratching the surface here. I think there's probably, you know, although it's a 4x4 grid, there's an awful lot of mileage you get out of a bank of 16 sounds, especially with the controls included. And I think the key for any sort of library like this is just to have good quality source sounds, which this does for me. And it gives you a kind of easy way to manipulate them within its own UI. So overall, I'm really digging this library. It sounds very modern, but has great texture and a kind of warmth to it as well. I can see it fitting well with some like neoclassical, ambient and experimental type music, but I'm also going to be using it in film score and other cinematic genres, I think. It makes me want to play in quite a minimal sort of way, I would say, which I guess a lot of modern film score stuff could be really useful, and it's got this nice way of being able to add a bit of interest without kind of doing huge tonal shifts or anything like that. So I'm told there are some updates planned for Stone in the future, so I'm excited to see what else Murst Instruments come out with. I've always been a fan of what I'd call mini libraries, where there isn't thousands of options, but what is there is really good. and lends itself to carving out your own sounds from it. And I think this kind of ticks those boxes for me. So that's it from me, guys. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this review, and thanks to Murst Instruments for sending me the library to check out. I've been really busy lately with new music and stuff, but I'm hoping to put out some more videos soon. So if you'd like to know when they're coming out, feel free to subscribe, and I'll see you again soon.